It's great to be here, to have been invited here with Robin. And a few words about me. I'm Martin Kristof from Heureka Group. I'm developer and team lead together. And I'm really happy to be here with my friend and my ex-colleague. We used to work together almost 18 years. It's 8 years. 8 years ago. 18 years. 8 years ago, yeah. And we have seen together a lot of ice hockey games.
Yes.
And we were the fans of Pardubice together against Sparta, sitting in VIP in Sparta. So it was tricky. And Robin, very great presentation. I like that. And could you tell me something about why I have to choose that approach of functional programming?
Yeah. So first thing, I'm very happy to be here with you, Maja, as well. Yeah, I remember that ice hockey game. Yeah, I'm kind of a fan of functional programming since, I think it started with React, to be honest. I remember that back in the days, I was CSS guy. Like I did CSS, that was my thing. I made this conscious decision not to do programming at secondary school, where everybody was like having PHP and many other languages at once. I focused myself on CSS, and I wanted to be the CSS invited expert in the W3C CSS working group, which didn't happen. But I think that this like conscious decision to focus myself on a very specific topic paid off, because later there was like this responsive revolution. I talked then about responsive images and all of that. And then I slowly moved to JavaScript, and I first started with Angular. I even did some Angular courses. And then React came, and I was really captured by how the idea is very simple, but it's so powerful. And I found React is based on functional principles. And I find these things in all the functional code. The idea is very simple. It's easy for me to understand. The composition means I don't have to hold in my head the whole image. I can really just focus on the small part, on the next small part. And then one day, or like before that, I figure out how to connect them, and this connection is kind of like standardized. So I really can focus on the small pieces, put them together. You have this nice flow, and it feels kind of easy and elegant for me to work with that. And because of that, I don't want to say that it's more performant or anything. And I mean, I don't care performance to the sense that's my first thing to do, but to write a code in a way that's understandable, I think that functional programming is pretty cool.
Okay, and then are there any advantages for testing, for example?
Yes, that's a very leading question.
For better testing.
Yeah. They're actually twofold, to be honest. One thing is that because you have well-defined inputs and outputs, you test those, right? When I was talking about returning things or having throw exceptions, this is something you need to test kind of extra. When you have the either I was talking about, or the result type, you really just have like, for this input, I expect this output. That's it. Like, it's very mathematical in this sense. Sometimes it's called a total function, meaning nothing else can happen in there. So that's one way how testing, I believe, is easier. It's like, in a way, you have a table, like input, output, are they correctly executed? The second part is that with types, mostly, once it works forever. What I mean by that is that because you don't have global state, you don't have mutable data, if it once run, it's almost it's impossible sometimes, of course, depending on the language and everything, that it would fail. There's even this new approach that when you change code, it will run the test, and it kind of writes a signature that it's passed for this hashed part of the, like, okay, it takes the function, converts into some standardized format, hashes it, and then says, for this hash, the code passes. And then if you don't change that, there's no need to run tests on the CI later for this. So even on that level, you can have much easier testing. And with types, I think it's very similar. Like for example, the composition I was showing before, when the types are correct, or when one function calls, like one test passes, it's correct. Like, there's no other way around that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And do you see any cons about that functional approach?
Oh yeah. I think that's why I created this talk. I believe that the whole topic about functional programming is very academical, and you will fall into that very easily. And when I say academical, it's like one really academical because it's based on category theory, and I study mathematics. I have some kind of idea what it means, but it's still very complicated. And then it's also the vocabulary, and the vocabulary is very foreign to people because they are not used to it. And I like what actually Scott Blushing says about it as well. It's like, if you look at OOP from the, like now, it has also weird things. If you didn't know about anything, and you would hear about inheritance, and Liskowski substitution principle, you'd be like, what is this? The only thing is that you were kind of taught it, you kind of were molded by it. It was kind of first thing you saw with PHP, which was first language for many people. So I believe this is like this kind of culture change that you are not used to these terms, and therefore they intimidate you. And that's the reason why Scott created this railway analogy to kind of ease that and say, okay, the parents are great, and we don't have to call them these magical terms.
Yeah, so this is your mission around.
Yeah. I mean, that's one is like to kind of teach about functional programming, because I believe it is really like a great way to write things. And the second one is about TypeScript, and to bring these ideas into TypeScript, which is not native to the language. Like, TypeScript was created by Microsoft. It was created by the same designer who designed C#. It has many things which are not functional. And it's not I wasn't a fan of TypeScript at the beginning. Like, there were other options I liked more. I was really big at Elm. I loved Elm. I organized meetups. Then when I couldn't have, when I didn't see Elm coming through, I looked at Reason. So before that, I looked at Flow. So for example, Flow is Facebook's alternative to TypeScript. It adds types to JavaScript, but it's much more functional. It has much more functional mindset. It's small things, but it makes things easier. But then again, I kind of realized it's not going to make it. Like, the majority of people will be using TypeScript. Like, that was clear. It's the winner. So my mission now is to say, okay, we did this one. Like, I agree with that. It's still a great framework, but let's bring more of these approaches to this and have functional programming in TypeScript.
Yeah, and regarding the TypeScript topic, is it still a question whether to use TypeScript or not?
Oh yeah, that's we had those discussions in my company. So we had this document which is called IT strategy, and Klarna is actually very it's limiting the languages you can use, because for hiring, for our internal support, kind of that you can switch people around and all of that. So they have like 4 official languages, but JavaScript and TypeScript are kind of bundled together. It's like one thing. And right now you can choose to use either, I think. But we are trying to push people towards more to the TypeScript side. I believe that's even like industry standard. And there is certain pushback. Especially, and I kind of agree with that, when you have very simple things like tooling, people don't want to use that. Like, things like TS Node are not on the same level as Node. And we will see what the Deno maybe does with that. Yeah. But right now, I do agree that for these use cases, it is questionable. But for me, having a code that runs in production that is not typed is a liability.
Yeah, and the arguments like there's a compile time and slow down my build time and and so on. I mean, it's useless right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great talk today about Gatsby, and they said how the build took I don't know, 30 minutes or 25 minutes or something like that. And if you put types to that code, it wouldn't change it. Like, we are not talking about TypeScript taking minutes. At least, I mean, I haven't seen that on my scale. So even if we add a few, I don't know, seconds even, or tenths of seconds, usually that's not that big problem. We have a big monorepo. We do run TypeScript checks on that monorepo. It takes sometimes, it sure does, but we do some smart checking that it only does it, on your, in a branch, it only does it on your changes somehow, and then on the master does it for everything to make sure. I don't think it's really a big problem. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, and if it's a problem for somebody, I'm willing to see that, but I haven't seen that myself.
Yeah, but maybe that advantages are, or that pros are, then have bigger value for us than the cons of TypeScript. So
yeah, I've not heard something. Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I mean, again, like, even for the smallest things, I now use TypeScript. I'm kind of, in the end, the browser is not TypeScript environment. And you see that when you open the console, you cannot write types. You can copy paste, run it in there. And that's, by the way, there's more, because the console in browser is not strict, for example. It doesn't have a strict mode. And I saw many times people tried something in the console. It worked one way, they put it in the code, which was strict mode by default, and it didn't work either. So now the kind of console is lacking in this sense, I would say. Yeah. I mean, again, like we kind of need what we see with Deno on the server side and tooling side on front as well. And we see that, by the way, with the new proposal for the JavaScript types annotations, which basically says you can use TypeScript annotations and we will ignore them, but at least in the console you can run it.
Yeah, and what about TS check feature? Use that types.
What is TS check?
This is that you put the annotation before the type in JavaScript, but use the types in TypeScript, but it's still JavaScript.
Oh, you mean like the JSDoc?
No, it's not. No. It is not JSDoc. It's just the annotation.
Yeah.
This is the comment.
Yeah, but it's JSDoc, right?
Yes, it's
okay.
similar.
I think we're talking about the same. So I know that you can write, like, before the function, you can write a special comment, and you say the first parameter is called name and it's a string.
No.
No. Okay.
I mean that you use that type from TypeScript.
Yeah.
But you don't need that compiler. Still your files are in JavaScript.
Okay.
But use the types because of the special comment. There is that TS check.
I see.
Keyword.
Okay.
And its ability to.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Types.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a assert for types, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that could be that's nice as well.
So it could be the combination. Yeah. You want to still use JavaScript with types without slow compile time.
Okay, I will add one more thing, and I talked about, like, the book I was talking about is called Domain Modeling, and this is whole movement of DDD, domain-driven design, and I really like it as well. And the idea is that, you have this domain you model, like we are a bank, so we model banking, and the model you have, like, in the business, the model you have in your head, the model that your PM shares, and the code model are the same. Like, you use the same names for the same thing. Like, if in the code you see user account, it immediately means the same thing for everybody. Yeah. It's the worst thing when the business is using, I don't know, accounts. The PMs will call it bank accounts. You will call it user accounts. It kind of creates this, like, problem to translate. One of the things that the domain-driven design says is you should have the same names there. And again, with types, you can have that much easily. The types kind of carry this domain knowledge, the domain model, and it will help immensely with cohesion of your code, because it is cohesive since it comes from the domain, which is by definition cohesive. So it helps, it makes things much easier, and it just removes this magic things from the code.
Yeah, and is there any, cons, we talked about cons, so that cons about TypeScript?
Yeah. I was at a different conference in London, which is like an architecture conference, and when we heard, like, it depends. Like, everybody says that, like, everything is about trade-offs, and architecture, which was the main thing, is that's the definition of trade-offs. So yeah, everything has certain trade-offs. Like with TypeScript, sometimes you are stuck on stupid problems. That happens. Like, I mean, it's because there are mistakes, maybe, especially with libraries. I think that some of the libraries do not have the quality you would expect. So, yeah, of course, there are some. I'm not sure about the learning, though. Like, I do believe that having this automatic check on your code actually helps with learning, even though it gives you errors, but it kind of doesn't let you do weird things and catch them earlier. So I don't know, like, I'm also comparing people who know JavaScript and they want to learn TypeScript, that's certain effort, because they are used to do things one way and TypeScript doesn't let them, and I know many people, versus newcomers to the whole ecosystem starting with TypeScript. I think that's a different experience as well. So,
and maybe the example Ricky mentioned yesterday, that dynamics objects and creating the dynamic objects, it could be tough with TypeScript to type it, but maybe this single example about it.
No, I mean, of course, like, in the end, TypeScript is not tool, it's a language. They call it a language, and I believe that each language comes with certain, I would call it culture, I would say. Like patterns they want to exemplify, and TypeScript does that, and it's not true. You can yes, on mathematical terms, you can type every JavaScript out there, but then the code is not what you would like to run. So the TypeScript does push you in a certain direction. That's what I was talking about Flow. Flow was also you pushing in a different direction.
Yeah, Flow.
Yeah.
We started and
yeah.
is that. Now, is here any question for Robin about these topics from the audience? Or shall I continue?
Yeah, sure. I would ask about the example you gave in the talk. I understand when you pipe all the calls, you need to wrap it in some unified interface. So that's the reason for the chain and T function. I don't understand the difference between the chain and T function. Why is those two? I thought it would be one, but they were two. So
I see. So maybe, I'm not sure if you can read, you probably, let me just quickly repeat the question. Okay. So the question is, it's okay? Wow, great, okay. So, so the difference is, what I want to show is that the update DB is a transformation on the data. So it takes some input and it transforms it to an output. But the console log is a side effect, right? It doesn't change the data. It just uses it and passes somewhere else. So you don't care what it returns, and that's kind of the difference. The chain here is really a pipe operator in a way you have in Unix, and in Unix you also have T, which means send it to this function, don't care what it does, and continue with the original value.
Yeah, I see.
I mean, obviously, you saw that the implementation, or I'm not sure if you could catch it.
It
was I know. But the implementation was very similar. The only difference, I don't care about the result of the T function, the result of the T when I pass there, of the log there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. Another question from the audience? No. Simple enough. So. We touched about FPTS.
Yeah.
And what about?
I was expecting some question about that. Yeah.
And what about side effects?
Okay. I had a different presentation. What was that? 2019, and this is a big flaw of all functional programming paradigm, right? It's all fun and games, but then I say immutable data, no side effects. And that's okay, so what can you do? And the idea is that you need to have side effects, sending requests is a side effect, showing things to the user is a side effect, getting information is a side effect. The same goes with you want to mutate maybe some data on a file or database. The main idea is that because these things are dangerous, you encapsulate them in a hopefully thin layer which does this. And the business logic, your application is functional, and the result of the computation is, sometimes it's called task, but it's not a good name. There's another one, maybe I'll remember. It's you tell what they should do. So the outcome of my code is return success, blah, blah, blah. And then there will be this thin layer that will actually send the request, and then maybe call me back. To understand this, I think that Elm is a great gateway to this, because they have this whole Elm data model, and it really helps to understand how this works. So you need to have that. You need to have something that actually does stuff, but because it's dangerous and hard to understand, you want to minimize it.
And are there any libraries which could help us with that side effects?
Oh, you mean in connection with FPTS?
Yeah.
That's actually a good question. So how we do that often is I write the main business logic in FPTS, and I just wrap it in some Express.js usually, and I have very simple bindings. I take the result, and the result needs to, for example, have an error code, and I will pass as a code, and we even have a very the whole Klarna has a standard for HTTP error response types. So it has to have some fields with certain values, and you transfer it to that from that object you receive. But I mean, you can very often write it yourself. Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a standard one. There's one which is called HyperTS, and that's Express, but it's indexed monoid, and that is kind of confusing. But yeah, I tried it. It's kind of nice. It's a very nice concept, but I wouldn't use it in practice, I guess.
Yeah, and have you ever tried it IOTS?
Oh wow, yeah.
Library?
I sure did. So IOTS, for those who don't know, it means like input-output TS. And this is exactly about this thin layer I was talking about before, is you don't trust your inputs, you need to validate them. And validation is actually not secure. And what people use is instead they call it decoding, right? Or parsing, maybe better word is parsing. So instead of validating, you parse. The difference is like subtle, but it's actually important because with validation, it's easy to forget about things. Like, you know, if you say this has to have a name, which is string, you might not say that there might not be anything else, right? And if you don't do that, the whole object can pass on, especially with things like underscore, underscore, proto, underscore, underscore, and then it's a security issue as well. With IOTS, you, again, very explicitly define what you expect, what is the shape, and you have combination of two things, which is great. You get runtime checks, meaning like in the runtime, I will check it's a number, but I also get types which are tied together. So after, like in one code, I define the shape, it will check it's correct, and in the following TypeScript, I have the types defined. When you use something like Joy, which is like a very popular library, you write a validation, and then you have to write types for it again, and then you need to make sure that it's like in sync and it's correct, and it's not going to be, it will eventually be wrong. So with IOTS, you get this together. And there's one more thing which IOTS does, and it's awesome, is that you can create your own types like integer or email, and your functions can expect integer, and it's guaranteed it's going to be an integer. It's not going to be a number, it's not going to be a float, it's going to be integer. It's not going to be a string, it's going to be an email. This is something that IOTS can do for you. It feels magical, it's kind of simple, like you can write it yourself, but again, it helps with how you think about it, and having a function accepting email, and you know it's going to be an email, not just a name email, but it is going to be validated as an email, is super cool.
Yeah, yeah, and it's similar. That's another question from me about Zot library. You mentioned Joy.
Yeah.
This is for validating schema, and it generates the types for us.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried it?
I'm not sure I heard about Zot. Is that the thing that Dan was talking about before? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know Zot.
Okay, but it's similar.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
different. Just
the thing with IOTS, you know, I kind of came first to IOTS because this was the appealing thing to have these types and validation at one. And it's made by the same order as the FPTS, so the errors you get from it are actually type either I showed before. And it kind of like, you know, snowballs itself, and you want to use it, and it makes sense. And it's very easy if you don't have to switch from one style to the other, so you kind of continue. And then when I write, for example, an endpoint, let's say, I kind of like to think about like RPC style. You have like encoder, this parsing at the beginning. You transform data, you collect all these errors. In the end, you have a decoder, which is like IOTS but the other way around. So you know that you always return the correct things, and you test it once, it works, and you don't have to look at it again because it just works.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Awesome. And how to combine that all with React?
Okay. That's a good question. I would say that the FPTS, I think about it in the terms of business logic, you know? I believe you should keep them separate. So if you have some business logic, you can have it in FPTS. With React, the problem is that you can't return, like, you know, we are talking about this how's it called? This new React that you can return the throw promise. How is it called?
Promise?
Yeah, you can throw promise in concurrent.
Concurrent.
Right? Yeah. So technically, you get implemented in FPTS structures, right? And that would be cool because that's what it kind of does. But they didn't do it. They didn't enforce any of this like functional thinking in there, like these names like either and task either, whatever. Yeah. Because they want people to use it more. I think that if they did that, it would alienate a lot of people. So it is kind of doing the same thing. As I said, React is functional in its core and in its thinking. It's just using different terms and different names and patterns, but it's kind of the same thing.
It's based on it. Pure functions, and pure
exactly.
functions.
Yeah. And I mean, for example, hooks are, like some algebraic side effects, I think.
Yep.
So it has patterns and all that is kind of already in functional word, like known. They just make it easier, and they don't call it those names, which I think helps a lot.
Yeah, and before FPTS came, was there any another library to help you reading a programming code in functional way? Maybe Ramda.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Leading question. I kind of wanted to say no, because for me, typed functional languages, like when you have both functional styles and types, it's really good. And before IoT, FPTS, I would use Elm or like different languages completely. Ramda is like on the edge, like it's kind of functional, but without the types, it's not that useful. And adding types to Ramda is pretty difficult. And I mean, it's nice. I liked, for example, Lodash-FP, which is kind of similar, and you can get some benefit from it. But compared to what FPTS is, it's a small subset.
Yeah. So, your recommendations use FPTS for it.
Yeah. And as I said, like, I know it's weird. It's gonna feel weird. You shouldn't think of like I will switch my career and become an FPTS developer. That's nonsense. and you might not be able to convince anybody in your team it's useful. I've been there. But once you do and once you understand that, I think that it's important to treat it as a prototype. I will just play with this, and that this mindset actually helps you to start with it, kind of ease yourself. Don't break it. I mean, you will not like it. Maybe you will do. I don't know. I just think that extending your I mean, people call it like going out of your comfort zone. I don't like that term. But like looking at other things and combining them in a creative way, that's where you can get a little benefit.
And maybe last question for me.
Yeah.
Do you think that reactive programming is a good way to enforce us?
I don't want to say that there's no silver bullet. We know that, like everybody knows that. It's all about the practicality. It's all about the team. It's about like the use case you have. So I don't want to say it's a good one. I think that for certain use cases and certain teams, it's awesome. For certain teams and use cases, it's good, and for some teams and use cases, it can be really harmful anyway. So I didn't want to say it,
it
but
could be.
Yeah, it depends. I didn't want to say that.
It depends. Yeah,
it's actually true.
Is there any question from you for Robin?
Yeah. Any more questions?
You have promised monads, but I didn't catch them in the talk. or you
oh yeah, I mean, I didn't promise monads. Ricky promised monads. Yeah. That was by the way, he played me there.
Yeah, a little bit.
The whole result type, that's a monad. That's either monad. Like that's the definition. Like it's a monad. That is monad. Yeah, that's what I would say. Like what I show, everything I showed there was a monad, and then I mean the chain function is sometimes called flat map or bind. I think in other languages, which is very often like bind is the one they usually use for monoids. So yeah, everything I showed was a monoid. I just didn't call it that, and I think that me and Ricky met about like we talked about our talks yesterday a bit, and we discovered we are kind of talking about very similar topics, and we are approaching things similarly. So when he said that I will go more to the details, that's not true. I just have these different idea how it should be used, but it's technically a very similar thing to what he did. Yeah.
So the principle which makes it monad is that it unifies the types of the binary processes, or what's what's the reason for?
Okay. I'm getting there. So a monoid. I mean, it's just that you have a value and you have a wrapper around it. So I had that value wrapped in failure or success, and that makes it and you work based on what is inside. So people say that Monade is a package, right? And you pass it on, and you have these functions that can like inspect it and do something based on it. That's exactly it. Like in a way, promises are also monoids as well as they are implemented. Because you have this then function. There are certain requirements for monoids. I think it has to have the bind function, which means this like I can look inside it and do something based on it. And then the second one is I have a value and I need it to wrap it in a package, which I forgot the name of. But that's it. Like that's monoids, and it's confusing and yeah, it's just wrapping the function in a package. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I could implement. So one of the easiest monads is maybe monad, which again was something similar to what Ricky was showing with his something and nothing, which is very often called something and nothing, but it's a little bit different. You can implement it in many ways. You can implement it with objects. You can implement it with symbols, for example. I did that. It's a pretty cool thing. But yeah. It's more about the mindset, how you look at things, that you don't look at the value, but the package and then the value inside it. Yeah.
And maybe if you want...
And there's this old saying, right, that there are two kind of people. Was it like people who, how was that? Who understand monads and people who can explain monads or something like once you understand it, you cannot explain it. That's what they say. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great. But that's how it feels.
I understand the principle of the package.
Yes.
Looking inside.
Yes.
The next function or it doesn't click. Like you mentioned it together, but
yeah. I feel that like promises are really cool because they don't talk about it, but they are exactly that. Like they have the problems I talked about. But other than that, they are the result type I was talking about, but with some limitations. So if you understand that you can have this value that passes through the chain and it goes either to like this direction, maybe going back, or this direction, and all of that, that is a monadic structure. And you have like then is this flat map as well. Yeah. And then promise resolve is this creator of promises. Yeah.
Complicated.
That's the funny part. I think that once it clicks, it's not like that's the tricky part. Yeah.
This is the tricky part.
Yeah.
Maybe when I saw your presentation or before, I studied your material for our Speedcars Corner. You sent me that link about Scott Vashin and his first and the base on your slides, and I went through all the materials, and I think there is a good article about that explaining the monads and all the things with the pictures, with the packages, and just nothing, everything.
Yeah.
So I think
by
it's
Scott,
cool.
Or?
No, I think it's not written by him, but there is I think a link to that article.
I mean, full disclosure, I read something like that when I was, like not knowing about monads. I don't know, 10 years ago. I read that article and I was like, what the fuck? Like it doesn't make sense, right? and then 5 years later, maybe less, I read it again. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And I had that myself. I know how it feels, and I know it's very confusing, and I know that it's like, like weird, but I think it somehow has to click. And I don't have a better explanation. Like the person that will find a good way to explain monads will be rich, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Billion dollar problem solved with that, yeah.
With monads. Is there any question? I think the last one for the Rubin. If not, so I think time's up.
I have a question for myself.
Okay.
You might have.
Okay. Let's go.
No,
go
I just wanted to say, like, I'm so happy to be at WebExpo. You can hear my voice because for me, WebExpo is more about meeting people, and that's why I like this. Like this talk, I could have recorded it in my home, talking to computer. That's not that much fun, but I could have done that. So I really like to meet with you, and if you have more questions, just please come and we can I'm driving tomorrow, so maybe not have a beer together, but at least talk and have something else and have some quick chat. So I'm happy to talk to people. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, it's cool. I think I think we are finished.
Yeah, we can check. I can drink today and drive tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We'll handle it definitely.
Yeah.
So maybe see Robin on after party. So join him without beer, maybe. But I know you. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll see,
Tomorrow.
we'll see. Yeah.
And so thank you all for attention, for your questions. Thank you, Robin, for your answers.
Yeah, thank you.
It was cool, for your time. It was amazing. And
Yeah. Happy to be here.
thank you so much.
Thank you.